to episode 290 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 15th of July 2024. Me, I'm Joe, and with me are Phelan.
Hola.
Graham.
Buenos dias.
And Will.
Hello.
It didn't come home, lads.
Oh, that's a terrible shame.
I've already moved on. Whatever.
To be fair, I moved on at the final whistle. So,
Yeah.
2 years' time, the World Cup, it'll be 60 years. It'll be all fine. Anyway, let's do some news. Chat control. This is a proposed law in the EU, which amounts to scanning messages. Now, as usual, it's got good intentions, trying to stop CSAM and that kind of stuff. But obviously, it's a terrible idea. It's still a proposal, but it's looking more and more likely that it will happen. And Patrick Breyer is a campaigner on this, and we can link to his piece, Take Action to Stop Chat Control Now. Now, obviously, there's nothing that us three can do, but Phelim, take action.
Okay, I'll do it. I'm clearly not going to think about the children.
Yeah.
What we really need is a backdoor, but only for law enforcement. That's what we need.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think so. I think they probably haven't heard of that, so I'll tell them, and then they'll just do it.
Maybe the telcos could be responsible for, overseeing it and making sure only the right people get access.
Do you know, if I think of the best self-regulating body, the telcos are where I would think of.
A great bunch of lads.
Well, Signal have said that if this comes into force, then they're just going to stop operating in the EU.
I think that's reassuring. I also think that despite the fact that we're in the UK, I think it will affect us because if this is passed in the EU, I'm sure, of course, under a different name to protect our sovereignty, we'll do the same thing soon enough.
Well, I'm sure this new Labour government will move a little bit closer to the EU than the Tories. So I think you're right, Graham. I think that this will affect us one way or another.
Yours would be the law for the control of chat.
Yeah.
I have never understood these policies in all the years they've been coming up, even the old PGP ban from the US. And we used to think that it was because the people making the decisions didn't have the technical nous to understand the decisions they were making. And it can't surely be that way now, can it? There's something more to it, and it must be about control.
Have you met normal people, Graham?
But 20 years later, it just beggars belief.
Well, if you explain to a normal person what encryption is, like a sort of, very high level.
Well, they're bank transactions.
Well, no, but that's the thing. If we do it, then we would explain about HTTPS and bank transactions and all the rest of it and credit card numbers being relatively safe. But if all you do is tell them the bad people can send each other messages and no one else can see them, shit like this is the inevitable result.
Yeah.
But they don't have anything to hide, Joe, so what's the problem?
Yeah. If you've not got anything to hide, then you've nothing to worry about and all that, yeah.
But who really thinks the bad people still won't use messaging services that people won't be able to crack?
Well, the funny thing was that the most recent thing was the fact that they had their own private mobile phone network that they were using. They were able to... Fair enough, they implemented it shittly and got caught, but they had their own fucking phones. And so, yeah, of course they will. If anybody is going to do anything, they're going to take a piece of software and go, oh, why don't I just run this myself?
Yeah, I don't understand how this is going to be enforceable because either they block you from installing the app, whatever that is, in which case, what happens to people coming into Europe from outside Europe who've already got the app working? Are they going to block access to those people? If yes, then VPN. If not, then VPN, install the app, close the VPN. It's just unenforceable at scale. So what are they thinking? What is their thinking here? I don't know. Additionally, I'd be interested to know what you guys think about on-device scanning of images. I think Apple said they were going to do this a while ago. It all went very quiet. But ultimately, there is money to be made here, and somebody is pushing for a service that will do such a thing, and they just happen to sell one. But if Apple come along and say, oh, we should do it on device, and then nobody makes any money out of it, okay. But what would you think that was an acceptable compromise?
A single false positive.
Yeah, we talked about this, and Apple did row it back in the end. There's several reasons why on-device scanning are not a good idea. False positives, as Phelim said. But also, it's not going to stay completely on device, is it? Someone is going to find a way around it.
Yeah, and my major concern with the whole idea of man in the middling everyone's encrypted email or messages is that it will leak in the same way that everything that has ever been behind some sort of protected system has leaked. Passwords, credit card numbers, personal information, iCloud photos, it will leak. And then all of your messages will be laid bare. Just crazy.
Well, we do use Telegram, so all our messages are laid bare anyway.
Look, there's 5 guys dealing with that, Joe. It's all fine.
And the sorts of people who are, I assume, organised enough to be using messages to exchange this kind of information, I would imagine that they are also organised enough to tell each other, oh, you want to use a VPN here, and undermine any kind of protection that this service might provide.
Yeah, bad people will find a way around this, and then all the rest of us will suffer as a result.
So I'm sorry, I'm a bit ignorant of this, but Germany and Poland are listed as opposed to the proposal. Does anyone know why they're opposed? Is it because of these very sensible things that we're saying?
Apparently not. Apparently it's something slightly more like they didn't get their way with something.
Right.
And yeah, I can't remember the exact details, but no, it's not quite as rosy as we think it might be. They are not the last vestige of hope here.
No, Germany wants tougher legislation against us.
Well, if you live in an EU country, then do look at Patrick Breyer's handy guide on what you can do. And let's try and stop this. A very quick, well done the Swiss. Switzerland mandates software source code disclosure for public sector. So that FSFE thing about public money, public code, well, Switzerland, of all places, have adopted this. I mean, there are some caveats, like if it's like super secure or national security and that sort of thing, then it won't be open source. But hopefully the majority of code written with public money will be open source.
Excellent.
Yeah.
There was a movement along these lines in UK government. I'm sure Stuart Langridge was involved in that, and some ex-Canonical as well. I don't really know what came of that, but the idea's certainly been floated in the UK for a long time. And it's hard to argue against that. If it's software paid for with public money, then the public have a right to see the source code. I hope beyond hope that the UK comes to a similar agreement.
So do I. I hope that this works out really well. The MBAG law, the Electronic Means for the Fulfillment of Government Tasks. That's not MBAG. I think they've massaged that acronym a little bit there.
You like tea in the UK? I'm sure you used to call yours tea bag.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully this will be hugely successful and governments all over the world will say, hang on, this is a great way to save money, because that's what ultimately talks here. So well done, the Swiss.
If they publish all of their code as open source under a permissive license, then any other country who wants to implement a similar system could just use the same code and contribute back to it.
Yeah, but if it's permissively licensed, then they'll just make it fucking proprietary. So we want them to do GPL all the way.
Oh, yeah. Fair point.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Automox. Are you prepared for whatever shitstorm may hit your desk during the workday? Automox has your back. Check out the brand new Autonomous IT podcast. Listen in as various IT experts discuss the latest Patch Tuesday releases, mitigation tips, and custom automations to help with CVE remediations. Make new work friends. Listen now to the Autonomous IT podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you tune into your podcasts. Why Chromium tells Google Sites about your CPU and GPU usage. This is a piece in the Register. And it turns out that Chromium-based browsers, such as Chrome and Edge, have this really cool feature where using a Google API, when you go to a Google domain, it can monitor your CPU and GPU usage and tell if the page isn't performing well and adjust accordingly and stuff. This is incredibly handy and useful, and why I'm changing to Chrome.
Good for you.
I see no possible downsides or problems with this.
You're so cynical, Joe.
What could they possibly be doing with that information?
Well, they definitely won't be using it in an anti-competitive way because they're good boys.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you go to these websites in Firefox and they're a bit shit quite a lot of the time.
It's difficult to know what to say. I feel like Google shouldn't have like closed APIs like this, and it should other browsers should be able to access stuff like this, and if they're going to do things like this on the open web. But fundamentally, yes, you're right.
I expect they'll argue that it's not closed because it is there in the Chromium source code for all to see. Just nobody really seems to have noticed it until now, hiding in plain sight. So, yeah, another reason to use Firefox, unless Firefox do something stupid. Dun, dun, dun.
Privacy Preserving Attribution, PPA, which did not confuse me at all while reading about this. I kept saying PPA. What's PPAs are?
I don't have any PPAs installed.
I don't use the Firefox PPA like Phelim does. Anyway. So, yes, Privacy Preserving Attribution. This is one of those ad tracking things. So the argument goes from Mozilla that advertisers need to track you. Okay, red flag number one. Yeah. But let's just go with that assumption.
Let's start off with a thing that's not really true and begin to build from there.
Yeah, so let's build on that shaky foundation. So they need to track you somehow. So either they're all going to do it themselves, and that's terrible, or let Firefox do it, anonymize the data, and then send it to them. So flawless logic, 10 out of 10. Thank you very much, Mozilla. Big green tick.
By default.
Yeah, by default. You can turn this off.
Done.
Just come on, Mozilla. We really try to not shit on you every fucking week. But then you do shit like this. But there's a couple of Mastodon threads we can link to. And one of them is from Gabriel Svelto, who has worked for Mozilla for 12 years. And in this, he points out that Mozilla isn't necessarily an advertising company, but they are a company or organization, whatever you want to call it, that exists because of advertising, because of the deals they've done with Google, and don't forget the billion they got from Yahoo as well. And he argues that they have always been an organization that is funded by advertising, so we should not be surprised that they're doing shit like this. And he also points out an uncomfortable truth that the internet is funded by advertising. And this just keeps coming up on this show and everywhere else because it's fucking true. People don't want to pay for things. Thank you, all the patrons. You do pay for things, but you are a minority. The majority of people who listen to this show have to listen to, definitely not skip, the adverts. So that's just how shit is. And so we kind of have to accept this sort of thing is an argument. At least you can opt out of it, I suppose, is the argument here.
I don't accept it. I would rather an internet without advertising and more shit in double quotes content than what the internet has become. I don't need this internet. I want an internet like it used to be. I'm not saying it needs to go back in time, but I'm saying I will accept that. The less slick produced videos for some video portal that tracks everything that I do and makes recommendations, the less produced content.
The constant outrage cycle driving people to become white supremacists that they didn't even realize they were.
The clickbait. This is what advertising has driven the internet to. It's not the other way around.
10 reasons why I hate this and one you won't believe.
But believe it or not, there is a worse alternative. As advertising generally has got less profitable and there are fewer advertising dollars around, I've started to see websites that were once upon a time reasonable news sources, which are now little more than a list of affiliate links. 5 great charges that you can get for a great price on Amazon Prime Day or whatever. And there's one that I'm thinking of that I'm not going to name because I don't want to risk it, but I think that this formerly good news site has had to do this because there's no ads to be had, and this is the only way they can make money. Whereas before, they were doing reasonable news reporting with ads, but now everyone's got an ad blocker and the ads don't pay as much. They've had to do shit like this.
Are you sure that they haven't just tried to grow every month like every other capitalist organization and not have a realistic game plan? And, you know, we are okay if we continue at this rate. We can employ everybody we need and research stories and be a good news site. Everything's a fucking investment now. It's ridiculous.
I agree.
I take that point, but I don't think in this case that is necessarily true because I know for a fact from personal experience that the arse has fallen out of the advertising industry.
Look, I don't disagree with that. But again, I think the problem is we have now a period where if everybody's blocking stuff and we're anonymizing things, the whole ad tech industry has to have a reason to exist when really, no, we need to sell the things to the people who want them. And maybe basing your ads on your audience that listens to you is the best way to do that. And you don't need fucking ad tech and the other hive of scum that's in there.
Yeah, and if you want tracking, have it be voluntary. Have a link, nameofbrand.com/late night Linux. And then if you go to that, you are voluntarily saying, I have heard this advert, please register my interest, rather than it be completely involuntary. Yeah, of course. That's how it should be. I've always advocated for this.
Yes, you have. And I agree with you, but I think everybody needs to do that, though.
Yeah. Advertising isn't inherently bad if it's done properly.
But advertising has got itself to this position by getting everybody addicted to it and itself changing every 3 months to become more clickable and more invasive and more demanding. And this is kind of the end game of a zero-sum game in advertising.
You're right, and it's sad, but this is where we are. And so what can we do about it except for use all the blocking that we can and try and kill the business model as far as it stands and force them to go back to content and broad audience-based targeting. If my article is about hard drives, then advertise cheap hard drives.
Yeah.
Is AI not going to kill off the advertising or a clickbaity news source anyway?
No, it's going to make it fucking worse.
In that way, I think that's going to kill it, though, isn't it? It's going to be a cycle of shite.
Yeah, I think it'll be a cycle of shite. But also, if you go to a well-known search engine asking for something and it just tells you the answer without having to click on the exact price of whatever it is you're buying at Amazon.com popping up at the top of the search results, will that not just kill those sorts of sites?
That assumes that the AI answers will be good, which they won't be.
If people are clicking clickbait articles, then they probably don't care whether the answers are good or not.
Probably.
Yeah, it's all fucked.
I think genuinely it is. It could be for the next 10 years, just petering out on then maybe nouveau internet.
I can see it happening. A new internet starting up.
Will we use blockchain?
Absolutely not. Well, I don't know, something akin to the dark web, but, not dodgy. Where if you're an academic and you can publish papers and everybody who signs up to it agrees to not be a dick, that'll probably work just fine.
Would we have to have some sort of markup language that we would use to write these things in?
Yeah.
Should they be all plain text on insecure protocols while we're at it as well?
The difference will be all the users have to pay me £10 a year to get access.
Even better, they have to use a device to dial on their telephone line to get into it.
First, you have to get a telephone line. That's your way in. Oh no, copper unbundling. I'm foiled again.
No, what we need is a universe, this new universe online, right? And it could be federated.
Oh,
right?
Tell me more.
And we could call it the Fediverse. I think there might be legs in this idea, lads.
Sign me up.
Seriously, though, I do think the Fediverse has got legs. It's basically what we've wanted for a long time.
The fundamental flaw with the Fediverse versus what we have as the web right now is that the Fediverse is boring as shit.
Be the change you wish to see, Will. Put interesting shit on the Fediverse.
You make a good point.
I'm sure there's Bluetooth protocol sniffers.local that you could subscribe to.
I bet you could find out there people who've got all those ESP32 whatevers and are really excited about that relatively new handheld computer thing with the ESP32 in it that I saw a video of recently that you can use as a universal remote as one thing. I'm sure there's loads of people somewhere in the Fediverse talking about it, and you just have to find them.
But I don't want to read all like that sort of thing. I want to see memes and cat videos primarily.
Well, start making them. Put it out there.
Oh, but then I'll be a content creator, and that won't end well. Nobody wants to see that.
Next, you'll be having influence over people. Okay, this episode is sponsored by 1Password. Imagine your company's security like the quad of a college campus. There are nice brick paths between the buildings. Those are the company-owned devices, IT-approved apps, and managed employee identities. And then there are the paths people actually use, the shortcuts through the grass. Those are unmanaged devices, shadow IT apps, and non-employee identities like contractors. Most security tools only work on those happy brick paths. but a lot of security problems take place on the shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all these unmanaged devices, apps, and identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. 1Password Extended Access Management solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. It's security for the way we work today, and it's available now to companies with Okta and coming later this year to Google Workspace and Microsoft Entra. So support the show and check it out at onepassword.com/late-night-linux. That's onepassword.com/late-night-linux. On to a bit of admin then. First of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed that includes either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And you even get some episodes early. And if you want to get in contact with us, you can email show@latenightlinux.com. All right, something that I haven't seen very much coverage of at all, really. And that is rebranding openSUSE. Now, this all started with a talk at openSUSECon a few weeks ago from Richard Brown and Robert Searchier. Now, Robert was speaking on behalf of SUSE, and Richard Brown had his openSUSE community hat on, although he does work for SUSE. And they laid out in this joint talk a reasonable argument for changing openSUSE's name. What they suggested changing it to was GeekOS, which I think is a terrible, terrible name. Well, it's kind of a pun on the gecko thing. But I'm sure they can workshop that and get it better. But anyway, they made a pretty good argument, I think, for changing it because there is some confusion between openSUSE and SUSE. Because openSUSE is this community thing, whereas SUSE is enterprise Linux. And they drew parallels with Red Hat, obviously, where you've got Red Hat and Fedora. And Fedora is clearly the community side of things, and Red Hat is the corporate enterprise side of things. And this is only a conversation at the moment, but it has come as a request from SUSE to the openSUSE community. And so it has not gone down brilliantly, shall we say. Now, I know that we don't give a fuck about SUSE generally. Sorry, Germans and other people, and Adam. But what do we think about this generally? You've got this community version. Is it confusing that it's called openSUSE when it's not actual SUSE?
I always assumed it was. So yes, then. Also, though, I don't understand how GeekOS was going to be a thing where the SUSE logo is clearly a chameleon. It's not a fucking gecko. Look at a picture of a gecko. It does not look like the logo that is the SUSE logo. That is a chameleon with the wonky, weird turret eye thing. So they clearly don't know what they are.
Well, it is quite a confusing situation with Leap and Tumbleweed. And now they've got like Aeon and MicroOS and other stuff that is not even branded as openSUSE at the moment. So that's also kind of part of the argument. But then it does feel like the corporate suits are making them change the name, and that's bad.
So SUSE, the enterprise company, doesn't like openSUSE being associated with its project, with its business.
I don't think it's that it doesn't like being associated with it. It doesn't like that there is confusion in the branding. Because, you know, people will use openSUSE and then think that it is SUSE, the enterprise company, that's making it and kind of expect support from them and stuff.
I mean, I've never had strong feelings for either. What I mean is I think there being an openSUSE helps SUSE just by the awareness of it. And I think it helps vice versa as well. The fact that the projects may not be so related anymore doesn't bother me. And I do think openSUSE changing its name to something else, Tumbleweed's bad enough, will diminish its influence even more.
It feels shockingly like CentOS being kneecapped by Red Hat, to be honest, when everybody knew that CentOS was definitely the gateway drug into RHEL. I don't care what they say about streams being so brilliant and all that. It's just not the same thing.
Well, they do argue that it wasn't a gateway and people were just sticking on CentOS and they were never going to convert to being customers. But I don't know how you could possibly have metrics for that.
Yeah, I think that's horseshit. I even know of clients that had CentOS stuff and Red Hat stuff, because then they were moving on to that for the production stuff. So that is absolute bullshit.
Well, yeah, and the argument is that you, as a student or whatever, learn the free thing, and then you get a job working for a company, or you start your own company, and then you want proper support and everything, and you want to pay for the real thing.
Well, to be quite honest, €750 for a server OS is a lot of money, even for a lot of companies, if you've got enough of them. I think this is kind of SUSE maybe cutting off their nose to spite their own face here. It feels awful short-sighted, unless they want to sell themselves again. And maybe they've been told they need to have a tight brand and not be associated with these long-haired, bearded hippies over there. And this is the way they're going to do that. Again, for the 25th time.
I mean, I don't want to come across as an Ubuntu fanboy, but it's a lot fucking simpler, isn't it? Or at least it used to be, that there is one Ubuntu and you can pay them for support and extra patches and all the rest of it, or you can just completely use it on your own.
I think there's a lot of value to that as well.
Yeah.
There is confusion, though, with what is supported by the pro stuff and what isn't, and, you know, constant things in my terminal. Oh, well, you could be getting another update if you signed up for pro, but you're not getting it because you didn't.
It's not ideal.
It's not ideal, but I do now realise that I prefer that model to the various slightly differently named products, which I can't really tell the difference between. Knowing that there is a base thing and then you can add on to it rather than pick a different lane entirely, it seems just much simpler to me.
With the caveat I work for Canonical, I'm sure Will back me up on this. The other great thing about Ubuntu is that it really does support the flavors and isn't too strict on what makes a flavor and is happy for those flavors to exist and do their own thing. Canonical encourages them to do that.
Unless you want to ship Flatpak.
Yeah. Okay, fair point about Flatpak. But apart from that.
Besides flatbacks, I think you're right.
And the aqueducts.
And obviously the roads.
I just think it's simpler. I think that what Shuttleworth got right was there being one Ubuntu. You know, I install Ubuntu on my NAS, I install it on a VPS, or I install it on a massive HPC cluster. It is the same Ubuntu. Whereas you look at Red Hat and SUSE, it's just confusing. I don't even find them attractive. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when it'll probably be discoveries and stuff, but who knows. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
Adios.